Captain Vance Acheron stared out the viewport of the Relentless Fury, his eyes tracing the jagged edges of the planet below, a world as hostile as any in the galaxy Karnak IV. It was a death world in every sense of the word: jagged mountain ranges of razor-sharp rock, sulfuric oceans boiling with poisonous gases, and a turbulent atmosphere that could tear ships apart if they ventured too close to its grip. It was the perfect battlefield. Vance's gloved hand clenched the armrest of his command chair. His crew was ready. They were always ready. Deathworlders were bred for this. Descended from the harshest of human colonies, they lived and thrived in environments that would obliterate any other species. And now the galaxy needed them more than ever. Time until we break Atmo, Vance asked. 7 minutes, Captain replied Lieutenant Karras, her voice steady. She was young but battle-hardened, a product of the Deathworlder training programs. Her skin bore the faint grayish hue common to those born on planets like Karnak, places where the sun's radiation left its permanent mark on human biology. The crew moved with the precision of veterans, eyes darting across holoscreens, fingers dancing over controls. They were preparing for war. Outside the viewport, hundreds of Deathworlder warships orbited in formation, their blackened hulls absorbing light, making them appear like ghosts in the void. These ships weren't built for beauty. They were fortresses, bristling with weaponry capable of tearing through enemy shields and hulls with brutal efficiency. Vance shifted his gaze to the horizon, where the telltale gleam of the enemy fleet shimmered on the far side of the planet. The Aliens. An ancient species, one of the most technologically advanced in the known galaxy. Their ships were sleek, curved like living organisms, with shields that shimmered with an eerie green light. The aliens were born in the cold vacuum of space, their civilization having evolved in the interstellar void. They were a species of conquerors, and they had set their eyes on Karnak IV. But the Deathworlders wouldn't let them take it. Acheron leaned forward, activating the comms. His voice was a low growl, the weight of years in combat evident in every syllable. All hands, prepare for combat. We're entering the storm. The moment he gave the order, the artificial calm within the ship dissolved into the fevered rhythm of battle preparation. Bulkhead doors slid shut, compartmentalizing the ship into combat zones. Power conduits lit up as the engines roared to full capacity. The hum of shield generators reverberated through the hull. And then, the storm hit. The Relentless Fury punched through the atmosphere of Karnak IV, the ship's shields glowing hot from the intense friction as it descended. Lightning forked across the sky as the violent winds howled outside. On the horizon, the alien fleet had taken up a defensive position, preparing for their own assault on the planet's surface. But they weren't prepared for the Deathworlders' assault. Enemy ships are locking onto us, Karras shouted from her station. Red warning lights blared across the bridge as targeting systems detected incoming fire. Brace for impact, Vance barked. A barrage of plasma beams lanced through the storm, slamming into the Fury's shields. The entire ship shuddered violently, but the shields held for now. Return fire. Full spread, Vance ordered, his hand gripping the armrest tightly. The Relentless Fury answered in kind. Its forward cannons unleashed a torrent of kinetic slugs and pulse missiles. The ship's hull-mounted railguns roared, launching projectiles at near light speed, slicing through the swirling storm with deadly precision. One of the alien frigates, caught in the onslaught, erupted in a brilliant explosion as its shields buckled and its hull was torn apart. But the alien fleet was far from defenseless. More plasma fire ripped through the storm, catching one of the Deathworlder destroyers just ahead of the Fury. The destroyer's shields flickered and failed, its hull crumpling like paper under the barrage before it broke apart, debris scattering into the storm clouds. Vance gritted his teeth. They were losing ships too fast. Lieutenant, what's our ETA to the surface? Vance demanded, his voice harsh over the sound of the ship's creaking hull. 2 minutes, Captain. We're almost there, but the enemy's blocking our landing zone, Karras replied. Not for long. Helm, divert power to forward shields. I want a path cleared to the surface. We take out their ground defenses first, or we won't survive the landing. The Relentless Fury surged forward, its forward shields glowing a fierce blue as they absorbed the incoming fire. The ship dove straight into the heart of the alien formation. Vance could see the enemy vessels clearly now, their organic-looking hulls shimmering with the glow of alien technology. Target the lead cruiser, Vance ordered. Karras nodded, her hands flying over the controls. The Fury's weapons locked onto the alien cruiser, and moments later, a volley of pulse missiles streaked toward the enemy ship. The cruiser's shields flared as it attempted to absorb the impact, but the Deathworlder weapons were relentless. The shields flickered and then failed, and the cruiser's hull was torn apart by a series of catastrophic explosions. A cheer erupted on the bridge, but Vance remained focused. "Keep firing. We've still got more of them out there." Suddenly, a warning blared across the ship. "Incoming fighters," Karras shouted. On the tactical display, dozens of small, fast-moving blips appeared, converging on the Fury. Alien fighters, sleek and deadly, armed with plasma cannons and energy torpedoes. "Deploy interceptors," Vance ordered. The Relentless Fury's hangar bay opened, and a squadron of Deathworlder fighters launched into the stormy skies, engaging the alien fighters in a chaotic dogfight. Explosions lit up the dark clouds as ships from both sides were torn apart in the aerial battle. Vance watched as one of the alien fighters broke through the defensive screen, diving straight for the Fury. Its plasma cannons flared, sending a barrage of energy blasts toward the ship. "Evasive maneuvers," Vance shouted. The Fury lurched to the side, but not fast enough. The plasma fire struck the ship's port side, punching through the shields and ripping into the hull. Alarms blared, and the lights on the bridge flickered as the damage reports flooded in. "We've lost port shields. Hull integrity is compromised," Karras yelled, her hands flying over the controls as she tried to reroute power. Vance swore under his breath. They were taking too much damage. "Get us to the surface," now he ordered. The Relentless Fury accelerated, breaking free from the alien blockade and diving toward the planet's surface. Below, the jagged landscape of Karnak IV loomed, a chaotic mix of mountains, volcanic craters, and sulfurous oceans. As the ship descended, Vance could see the alien ground forces entrenched across the planet's surface. Their energy turrets and artillery emplacements glowed ominously, ready to tear apart any ship that attempted to land. "We'll have to clear the LZ manually," Vance muttered. He stood up from his command chair, his combat armor hissing as it sealed around him. He looked at Karras, who was already doing the same. "Get the strike teams ready," Vance said. "We're going down there to finish this fight ourselves." The hangar bay of the Relentless Fury was a hive of activity as Vance and Karras entered. Hundreds of Deathworlder soldiers were gearing up for the ground assault, their armor dark and menacing, designed to withstand the hostile environment of Karnak IV and the brutal combat that awaited them. Vance's own armor was a custom model, reinforced with layers of durasteel plating and equipped with a personal energy shield. It was a relic from his days as a frontline infantry commander before he had taken command of the Fury. He hadn't worn it in years, but today was different. Today he would lead his people into battle. "We've got heavy resistance on the surface," Karras said as she checked her rifle. "The aliens have deployed their ground troops across the planet's equatorial region. Their artillery emplacements are targeting our ships. We need to take those out if we're going to hold the planet." Vance nodded. "We take the emplacements, we cut off their reinforcements. Then we hold the line until the fleet breaks their blockade." The strike teams were ready, assembled in tight formations as they waited for the order to deploy. The Deathworlders moved with a calm, disciplined efficiency, their expressions grim but determined. These soldiers had been born on worlds where survival was a daily struggle, where the environment itself was a constant enemy. They had been trained in combat since childhood, molded into warriors who knew no fear. "Let's show these aliens what happens when you try to take a Deathworld," Vance said, his voice carrying through the hangar. The soldiers let out a low, rumbling cheer as the drop bay doors opened. The planet's surface, scarred and inhospitable, lay below them. The winds howled through the open bay as the first wave of dropships launched, carrying the strike teams toward the battlefield. Vance and Karras were among the last to board their dropship. As the door sealed shut and the ship descended, Vance could feel the familiar rush of adrenaline coursing through his veins. This was where he belonged on the front lines, leading his people into battle. The dropship shuddered as it broke through the atmosphere, the turbulence rattling the hull. Outside the viewport, Vance could see the flickering lights of alien anti-aircraft fire, their plasma bolts streaking through the sky like lightning. Several dropships in the distance were hit, their wreckage spiraling toward the ground in flames. But the Deathworlders pressed on. "We're coming in hot," the pilot shouted as the dropship weaved through the incoming fire. The ground rushed up to meet them, a jagged landscape of volcanic rock and sulfuric lakes. As the dropship hovered above the landing zone, the door slid open, and Vance was the first to leap out, his boots slamming into the rocky terrain. They were in the middle of hell. Captain Vance Acheron hit the ground hard, his boots sinking into the jagged volcanic rock of Karnak IV. The air was thick with sulfur, the toxic winds howling like the wails of the dead. Around him, the first wave of Deathworlder troops deployed from the dropships, their armor gleaming darkly in the dim, orange light of the planet's volcanic atmosphere. Shields up. Form a perimeter, Vance barked into the squad comms as his strike team spread out, establishing a defensive formation around the landing zone. A series of deep thuds reverberated through the air as the aliens opened fire. Their artillery emplacements, perched high on the cliffs overlooking the Deathworlder position, unleashed plasma shells that screamed toward the ground. The first explosion rocked the earth, sending chunks of rock and debris flying in all directions. Move, 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 Vance shouted, diving behind a jagged outcropping of rock as another plasma shell detonated nearby. His personal energy shield flickered, absorbing the worst of the blast, but he could feel the heat searing through the armor. He glanced over at Lieutenant Karras, who had taken cover beside him. "We need to take out those artillery batteries, or they're going to tear us apart before we even get a foothold." Karras nodded, her face set in a grim expression. "I've marked the locations of the batteries on the map. They're dug in deep on the ridge, covered by shield generators." Vance cursed under his breath. Of course, the aliens would be entrenched, using the planet's natural defenses to their advantage. But Deathworlders thrived in hostile environments, that's why they were here. "Send in the heavies," Vance ordered, signaling to his demolitions team. "We'll clear a path." A group of heavily armored Deathworlders surged forward, their massive exosuits equipped with rocket launchers and portable artillery. Their armor, reinforced with dense alloy plating, shrugged off the smaller plasma blasts that the alien ground troops sent their way. The first of the heavy troopers braced himself, aimed his shoulder-mounted launcher, and fired a barrage of rockets at the ridge. The explosion lit up the sky as the ridge shook, several of the alien emplacements crumbling under the assault. But the aliens were relentless. From the ruined artillery positions emerged squads of their infantry, tall, sinewy creatures with reflective, chitinous armor. They moved with a strange, fluid grace, their weapons glowing with a sickly green energy as they opened fire. One of Vance's men screamed as an energy bolt punched through his armor, the acidic plasma eating through the flesh beneath. Vance grimaced as he returned fire, his pulse rifle spitting high-velocity slugs into the approaching enemy. The Deathworlders were tough, but the aliens had evolved in the vacuum of space. They were built for war, and their technology was centuries ahead of anything humanity had developed. But what the Deathworlders lacked in technology, they made up for with raw, brutal resilience. "Push forward," Vance ordered, sprinting from cover as his squad moved with him, rifles blazing. The ground shook beneath their boots as the battle raged. Explosions lit up the landscape, the sky above a storm of fire and plasma. Alien bodies crumpled under the relentless assault of the Deathworlder forces, but for every enemy they killed, two more seemed to take their place. "We're getting pinned down here," Karras shouted, her voice strained as she ducked beneath a volley of plasma fire. Vance took stock of the situation. The aliens were slowing their advance, but it wasn't enough. They needed to break through and take out the artillery, or the entire assault would fail. "Karras, I'm taking Bravo team around the left flank," Vance shouted over the comms. "You hold the center. Keep their attention on you." Karras nodded, a determined glint in her eyes. "You got it, Captain. We'll give them hell." Vance signaled to Bravo team, his most experienced soldiers. These were veterans who had seen countless battles on Deathworlds far more dangerous than Karnak IV. He knew they could handle whatever the aliens threw at them. "Stay close," Vance growled as they moved out, weaving between the jagged rocks that littered the battlefield. The sound of gunfire and explosions echoed around them as they moved along the flank, out of the immediate line of fire. As they approached the ridge, Vance could see the shield generators protecting the remaining alien artillery positions. The glowing energy barriers shimmered in the heat, practically impenetrable without heavy ordnance. "We'll need to take those shields offline," Vance said, gesturing to the generators. "Davik, you got charges." Sergeant Davik, a massive brute of a man with a heavy scar running down the side of his face, nodded. "Enough to blow half this ridge to pieces, Captain." "Good. Set them on the nearest generator. We'll cover you." Davik moved with surprising agility for a man of his size, weaving through cover as the rest of the team laid down suppressive fire, keeping the alien infantry at bay. Vance aimed down the sights of his rifle, picking off an alien soldier who had attempted to flank their position. "Charges are set," Davik shouted, sprinting back to the team. "Clear the area." Vance signaled the retreat, and the team fell back just as the first explosion rocked the ridge. The shield generator erupted in a ball of fire, and the shimmering barrier surrounding the artillery flickered and died. Now Vance shouted, and the Deathworlders surged forward. With the shield down, the artillery was exposed. Bravo team moved in quickly, using grenades and rocket launchers to obliterate the remaining alien positions. Vance shot down an alien sniper perched on a ledge, his pulse rifle spitting high-velocity rounds into the creature's skull. "Captain, artillery's down," Kara's voice crackled over the comms. "We've got control of the ridge." Vance felt a wave of relief wash over him, but it was short-lived. "Captain, we've got incoming," Davik shouted, pointing toward the sky. Vance looked up and saw a sight that chilled him to the bone. The clouds above had parted, revealing the hulking form of an alien dreadnought descending toward the planet. It was massive, its organic tentacle-like arms bristling with weapons. And it wasn't alone. More ships followed in its wake, dozens of them. The alien fleet had arrived. Part 5: The Dreadnought's Shadow. "Damn it," Vance muttered, watching as the massive dreadnought cast a long, dark shadow over the battlefield. The ship's main cannons began to glow, preparing to rain down destruction on the surface. "We can't fight that," Kara said through gritted teeth, her eyes wide with a mix of shock and anger. "Not like this," No, Vance replied, his mind racing. "We've got to force it to divert fire or they'll glass the entire area." He quickly opened a channel to the Relentless Fury in orbit. "Fury, this is Captain Acheron. We need immediate air support. The aliens are bringing in a dreadnought. We've taken out their ground artillery, but we won't hold if they start bombing the surface." Static filled the line for a moment before Commander Alera's voice came through. "Copy that, Captain. We're sending reinforcements, but it'll take time to punch through their fleet." "Hold the line as long as you can." Vance cursed. "Time's not something we've got much of, Commander." The Fury was one of the toughest ships in the fleet, but the alien armada was already overwhelming their defenses. Vance knew that if the dreadnought focused all its fire on the surface, the Deathworlders would be vaporized before reinforcements arrived. He turned to Bravo team, his expression grim. "We're going to need to go on the offensive. If we can't stop that thing from firing, we're all dead." Davik snorted, hefting his massive grenade launcher. "I say we take the fight to them." Vance nodded, a dangerous gleam in his eyes. "Exactly what I had in mind." He opened a channel to Karis. "I'm taking Bravo team and heading for the alien landing zone. We're going to board that dreadnought." "Are you out of your mind?" Karis replied, her voice rising in disbelief. "Maybe," Vance admitted. "But it's the only chance we've got. Hold this position as long as you can. If we can cripple their ship, it might just turn the tide." There was a pause, and then Karis' voice came through, cold and hard. "Good luck, Captain. We'll keep the bastards busy down here." Vance and his team moved swiftly, cutting through the jagged terrain toward the alien landing zone. As they neared the drop point, they could see the alien dropships descending, depositing waves of reinforcements. The dreadnought loomed overhead, a monstrous silhouette in the stormy sky. "We'll need to hijack one of their dropships to board the dreadnought," Vance said as they hunkered down behind a rocky outcrop. "Davik, you're on anti-air. Take out their air support. We don't want any surprises." Davik grinned savagely. "With pleasure, Captain." He shouldered his rocket launcher and took aim at one of the alien fighters buzzing overhead. The weapon barked, sending a missile streaking toward the target. The fighter exploded in a ball of green fire, its wreckage plummeting to the ground. The Deathworlders moved quickly, dispatching the remaining alien ground forces with brutal efficiency. Vance led the charge, his pulse rifle spitting rounds into the alien soldiers as they advanced on the dropships. "Take one intact," Vance shouted over the roar of gunfire. "We need it to get to the dreadnought." With precision fire, the Deathworlders disabled one of the alien dropships, its engines sputtering but still operational. Vance and his team rushed forward, securing the ship. "Get us airborne," now Vance ordered as he strapped into the cockpit. The dropship's alien controls hummed to life as one of Vance's tech specialists hacked the system. The ship lifted off, rising into the stormy sky toward the dreadnought. Once we're inside, we plant charges on their main reactor, Vance said, his voice cold and calm. We blow that thing sky high and take out as many of them as we can. The dropship ascended through the clouds, the dreadnought growing larger and more menacing as they approached. Vance's pulse quickened. This was a suicide mission, and he knew it. But if it meant saving Karnak IV, it was a sacrifice he was willing to make. The dropship closed in on the dreadnought's landing bay. Vance's fingers tightened around his rifle. This is it. Get ready. The alien dropship shuddered as it entered the alien dreadnought's hangar bay, its sleek hull fitting seamlessly with the organic curves of the massive vessel. Vance Acheron could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him as the dropship's landing struts made contact with the deck. The moment the ship settled, the team was already moving, their weapons at the ready. The hangar was dark, the ambient light a sickly green, casting long shadows across the floor. Alien workers and soldiers moved about, tending to their war machines, unaware of the Deathworlder intruders. Move quietly. We don't want to raise the alarm until we hit the reactor, Vance whispered over the comms, his pulse rifle pressed against his chest. He led Bravo team out of the dropship, sticking to the shadows as they advanced toward the hangar's exit. The door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a long, dimly lit corridor. The walls of the dreadnought pulsed faintly, almost like a living organism, and the air had a metallic tang to it. The entire ship felt alive, as if the aliens had fused their technology with biological elements. It was unsettling, but Vance pushed the thought aside. They had a mission to complete. Davik, how far to the reactor? Vance asked. Davik consulted his datapad, which was tapping into the ship's systems. About 5 levels down, Captain. We'll have to pass through their central control hub to get there. Vance's jaw tightened. Then we move fast. If we get spotted, we'll have the whole damn ship on us. The team moved quickly through the corridors, their boots making barely a sound against the strange, fleshy material that lined the floor. They encountered only a few aliens on their path, dispatching them silently before they could raise an alarm. Finally, they reached an elevator shaft leading down to the reactor core. Vance signaled for the team to take positions as Davik began hacking the control panel. The doors slid open with a soft chime, and they descended into the depths of the ship. The ride was tense, the only sound the hum of the elevator. Vance checked his rifle, his mind focused on the task ahead. This was it. They were deep inside enemy territory, with no way out but forward. When the doors opened, they were greeted by the ominous glow of the reactor chamber. It was massive, the core pulsating with a sickly green light that cast long shadows across the room. Alien power conduits snaked out from the core, feeding energy to every part of the dreadnought. Fan out, plant charges on those conduits, Vance ordered, his voice low but firm. We blow the core and take this bastard down. The team moved with practiced efficiency, attaching high-yield explosives to the power conduits. Vance kept his eyes on the entry points, knowing that the moment they detonated the charges, the aliens would be on them in full force. We're all set, Captain Davik reported, his voice crackling in Vance's ear. Vance was about to give the order to detonate when a loud, echoing sound reverberated through the chamber. The doors to the reactor room slammed open, and a wave of alien soldiers poured in, their green energy weapons glowing menacingly. Contact, Kara shouted, raising her rifle and opening fire. The quiet infiltration was over. Vance dove behind a pillar as plasma fire filled the air, the room exploding into chaos. Bravo team returned fire, their pulse rifles tearing through the alien ranks, but more soldiers kept pouring in. Vance saw the glimmer of an alien commander, its tall, sinewy frame directing the assault with precision. We've got to blow the core now, Davik yelled over the commotion. We won't survive if we stay here. Vance knew he was right. They were outnumbered, and the enemy knew the terrain better than they did. But they couldn't leave without finishing the mission. Everyone fall back to the elevator. We'll blow the core remotely, Vance shouted. The team fought their way toward the elevator shaft, cutting down aliens as they moved. Vance covered the retreat, his rifle barking as he laid down suppressive fire, but the enemy was closing in fast. As the last of Bravo team made it to the elevator, Vance ducked behind a console and triggered the detonator. The reactor core erupted in a massive explosion, the shock wave ripping through the chamber and vaporizing the nearby aliens. The entire ship shuddered violently as the power conduits overloaded, sending arcs of energy crackling through the walls. But it wasn't over. The explosion had damaged more than just the core. Alarms blared throughout the ship, and Vance could feel the dreadnought lurching, its structure beginning to fail. "Go, go, go," Vance shouted, leaping into the elevator just as the doors closed. The ship trembled beneath them, and Vance could see the panic in his team's eyes. "The whole thing's coming down," Karis said, her voice tight with fear. "We won't make it back to the hangar in time." "We have to try," Vance replied, but even he wasn't sure they could make it. The dreadnought was dying, and it was taking them with it. The elevator doors opened at the top level, and the team sprinted toward the hangar bay. The corridors were filled with debris as the ship continued to break apart, pieces of the ceiling crashing down around them. Plasma fires erupted from damaged power conduits, bathing the halls in green flames. They burst into the hangar just as the dreadnought's hull began to buckle. The remaining dropships were already leaving, fleeing the collapsing behemoth as fast as they could. "There's one left," Davik shouted, pointing to a dropship at the far end of the bay. "Move," Vance ordered. They sprinted across the hangar as the ship's structure groaned and buckled. Chunks of the ceiling collapsed, sending massive pieces of debris crashing to the ground behind them. Vance could hear the roar of the reactor's meltdown growing louder, the ship's core collapsing in on itself. They reached the dropship just as the hangar began to tear apart. Davik jumped into the pilot's seat, firing up the engines as the rest of the team scrambled aboard. "Hang on," Davik yelled as the dropship lifted off, banking hard to avoid a falling support beam. The ship shot out of the hangar just as the dreadnought began to implode. Vance looked back and watched as the massive vessel crumpled in on itself, a blinding explosion of green light ripping through its center. The shockwave rocked their dropship, but they managed to stay on course, flying through the wreckage as the dreadnought disintegrated behind them. "Did we get out in time?" Karis asked, her voice breathless. Vance checked the sensors. The Relentless Fury was still in orbit, its remaining forces engaged in a fierce battle with the alien fleet. But the destruction of the dreadnought had sent shockwaves through the enemy forces. Their command ship was gone, and with it, their tactical advantage. "We did," Vance said, a grim smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Now we finished the job." The Relentless Fury was a scarred warship, its hull pocked and scorched from the brutal space battle raging above Karnak IV. But it was still fighting. As Vance and his team approached in the stolen dropship, they could see the alien fleet beginning to falter. With their dreadnought destroyed, the remaining alien ships were in disarray. "We're clear for docking," Karis said as they received a transmission from the Fury. "Good. Time to end this," Vance replied, guiding the dropship into the hangar. The moment they landed, Vance jumped out, his boots hitting the deck with purpose. He felt a new surge of energy, a sense of victory within reach. The Fury's command center was a flurry of activity. Commander Alera turned as Vance entered, a look of relief crossing her battle-hardened face. "Good to see you alive," Captain Alera said. "You did it. The dreadnought is gone. The aliens are in full retreat." Vance nodded, glancing at the tactical display. The alien ships were pulling back, their formations scattered and broken. The Deathworlder fleet pressed the attack, cutting through the remaining vessels with ruthless precision. "It's not over yet," Vance said. "We push them out of this system, and we make sure they never come back." Alera gave him a nod of agreement. "All ships press the attack," she ordered. "Let's end this." The final moments of the battle were brutal but swift. With their command structure shattered, the aliens couldn't hold the line. One by one, their ships were destroyed or driven into retreat. The Deathworlders gave no quarter, ensuring that the alien fleet wouldn't have a chance to regroup. As the last enemy ship blinked out of existence, a sense of quiet descended over the battlefield. Karnak IV, battered and scorched, remained in Deathworlder hands. Vance stood at the viewport, watching the planet below. The cost had been high, but they had won. The aliens had been beaten back, and the Deathworlders had proven once again why they were the galaxy's most feared warriors. He turned to Karis, who stood beside him, her armor scuffed and scarred from the battle. She gave him a tired but triumphant grin. "We did it," she said. Vance nodded, his eyes still on the stars. "Yeah, but this war's far from over." As the Relentless Fury moved away from the ruins of the alien fleet, Vance couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The galaxy was vast, and the aliens were just one of many enemies they would face. But for now, Karnak IV was safe. And that was enough.